Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds, and I'm here with Keith, co-star of my upcoming film, If, only in theaters May 17th. Do you want to tell people the big news? All right, I'll do it. Sign up now and you'll get unlimited for $15 a month and 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan on us. MintMobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 equivalent to $15 per month. Unlimited over 40 gigabytes per month. Face lower speeds. Videos at 480p. Active Mint customers by 531.24 get 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan. Auto renews after 6 months. Offer ends May 31st, 2024. Separate Paramount Plus registration required. Terms and conditions apply if rated PG.
This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. You may have heard me start with a half chuckle there. It was only a half chuckle because, unfortunately, the lack of countdown is becoming an issue. Kieran's getting the 5-4-3-2-1 on this screen, and I'm not. Kieran's very helpfully going 5-4-3-2-1 for me, but I'm just sitting there sulking that it's not coming up on my screen. This is a producer guy issue, Kieran. Starting with this technical explanation is another reason why we're not getting that BAFTA, Kieran. But how is Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire this morning?
Tickety-boo. We're recording this on Wednesday. So when we finish, I'm about to hop on a flight to that there Amsterdam for Soccer X.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to be on stage with Charlie Methven, which will warm the cockles of the hearts of many a Sunderland fan, I'm sure.
You know, the other day there was a photograph in the tabloids, which may or may not have been photoshopped, of Mr. Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, visiting Morrison's and managing to put his head between the M and so it looked like the sign said moron. When you're at Soccer X, do not send the Baroness a photograph with your head obscuring the words O-C-C-E-R, because the last thing the Baroness will want is you sending a photograph from Amsterdam in front of a sign saying sex.
Absolutely.
Yes, Amsterdam's wasted on you, Kieran, for so many reasons. And
I suspect
it's just literally, but people, reason for visit. I'm going to a business conference. Really? Yeah, they'll be getting, the poor customs man will be getting a superior officer going down. So this bloke says he's going to a conference. Then they'll go into a little huddle and go, all right, let him through. Maybe we do that in Amsterdam. Who knows? It's Newsday, Kieran, and I'm worried about this. I'm ashamed to say almost that the first two news stories involve my club, Crystal Palace, Kieran. The first one is that they've put forward a motion. Steve Parish has obviously put forward a motion, which Premier League clubs are going to vote on quite shortly. Can you tell us what it's about, Kieran?
Yes, I think this is an intriguing one, and I suspect that Newcastle United fans will be gnashing their teeth when they hear this, because if it is passed, it means that they won't have benefited from this particular issue for 23-24. The issue that Steve Parish has raised, and I think it does have some validity, is that if you qualify for European competition, you instantly are guaranteed some money. And that money is linked to your performances in Europe over the last 5 to 10 years. And Steve Parish's argument is, in the Premier League, you are rewarded for what you've done in season 23-24. And we call those merit payments, and it works out as around about £3.5 million per year. In Europe, they don't do that. And I think the observation from some is that it's done to protect the big clubs. Because if one of them gets knocked out of Europe early doors, what they want to be able to say, well, hold on, we did quite well in 2018 and we did quite well in 2015, and therefore we're going to be protected in that way. So this is, I think UEFA have bowed to the bigger clubs and also the European Club Association, who are effectively the mouthpiece of the big clubs. They've got membership from many clubs, many hundreds of clubs across Europe, but the voting power is very much given to the usual suspects, shall we say. So what Steve Parish is suggesting, and just to sort of give you some form of quantification here, Newcastle last year. The way that it works is each of the 32 clubs in the Champions League are ranked on the basis of their success in Europe in the last 10 years. Well, Newcastle United have had a Mike Ashley-shaped issue to deal with over that period of time. So it was their first year in Europe. That they are ranked, according to their performance, Newcastle United got 4.5 million for coming from the UK. Arsenal, who haven't qualified for the Champions League since about 2016, they got 25 million euro for exactly the same.
Yeah.
Manchester City got 32, Manchester United got 28. And you look at that and you go, well, that does seem to make it slightly more difficult for Newcastle United to be competitive. So the suggestion from Steve Parish is that if you do qualify for Europe and you are given a low 10-year ranking, then you should be allowed to lose money or allowed to lose more money to compensate for that under the PSR rules. So that would have assisted Newcastle this year, although there's separate UEFA rules to satisfy. In addition to that, I think there's a proposal from Aston Villa, who have qualified, of course, for the Champions League next season, that the £105 million limit, allowable loss, is increased to 135. That they've said, and I've said this on a regular basis, is that £105 million was introduced in 2013. We're a decade later. You've index linked most things in life, so why haven't the allowable losses? And that would mean it would be more easy for Aston Villa to invest in their squad, to have a more competitive team, to enter the Champions League next season, and therefore, from their point of view, to be able to proceed further in the tournament. When you listen to Newcastle fans, and look, as fans, we are all biased towards our own club, but they feel that they've had to operate with one hand tied behind their back this season because they've not been in Europe for so long.
I don't know if you can answer this question, Kieran, but football fans being football fans, already on many WhatsApp groups, Palace fans are going, well, this is Steve Parish's way of saying we're going to be in the Champions League next season. He can't say it out loud because that would seem too ambitious, but this clearly he's expecting us to be in the Champions League, which is nonsense, obviously. But I don't quite understand why Steve Parish or Crystal Palace would be concerned with giving clubs that will be in Europe more flexibility over their finances.
Yeah, it's those clubs that are in Europe who are being discriminated against by the existing European rules.
Right.
I think Steve Parish's beef is that the sneaky six who were behind Super League have got such a financial advantage, and the existing European rules give them a further advantage, that he's trying to level the playing field between those clubs who we might put into the ambitious stroke aspirational category. And I think both Newcastle United and Aston Villa fall into that category. I think there will be other clubs. If Leeds United are promoted back to the Premier League, I think their owners would probably feel the same. There's been talk about Leeds moving to a 50,000 capacity stadium to accelerate that club as well. So you can understand where he's come from. Is this linked to a change of gear at Crystal Palace going forwards? We'll have to wait and see.
John Textor is publicly keen to sell his stake in Crystal Palace, which we believe is 48%. This has never been quite accurately confirmed, but we believe John Textor wants to sell his 48% stake in Crystal Palace. That is a fact. What we don't know, Kieran, is whether that is to facilitate the purchase of Everton or not, which is a rumour, but it's a rumour that's failing to go away.
It is. So from the point of view of how do the rules operate, you cannot have more than 10% ownership of two clubs in the Premier League. So should John Textor wish to acquire control of a club, and certainly looking at his public pronouncements, they have been very much geared towards, I'm having a great time at Crystal Palace, but there's things that I want to do, but I'm unable to do so because I have less than 51%. So he operates a multi-club ownership model, as we know, with clubs in Brazil and elsewhere. And I think he wants to be able to have a continuity amongst all of those clubs. Reading between the lines, there's a Steve Parish shaped blockage in his ambitions, and therefore he's looking for an alternate route. So, going back to the story we've just been mentioning and tying it together, I'm sure some Palace fans will be saying, well, perhaps Steve Parish has got somebody else lined up who can put rocket boosters on Palace, move them to a 50,000 seater capacity stadium somewhere, for example, and therefore they could become the next Chelsea / Manchester City / Newcastle in terms of having owners who are able to put money in. And therefore what he's doing, he's trying to scope things forwards for Palace. So that's that position. In terms of Everton, we are recording this. This show will go out on the 30th of May, 2024. The 31st of May, by all accounts, is the deadline set by Farhad Moshiri in terms of 777's offer. There is increasing evidence that 777 are not in a position to comply with the rules that were set to allow them to buy the club, the rules that were set by the Premier League. And the Premier League comes in for a lot of criticism. I think here the Premier League's actually done a very good job. They've looked at the reservations that people have had in respect of 777, and they said, right, what you've got to be able to do, you've got to repay the existing loans, you've got to show us where your money's coming from. Now, 777 can easily have sorted that if they've had the money and if they've got the evidence of their sources. They failed to deliver, spectacularly failed to deliver. So therefore, that would mean that their relationship with Moshiri would effectively lapse, and this would potentially allow Textor to take over. Although I think there's a separate issue with 777 in the sense that their loans from MSP are due for repayment at the end of this month, and there's no sign that Everton can repay them. Does that mean that MSP take over the club? That could be the case. From what I'm hearing, MSP are not, it's not their particular thing to run a football club. So therefore, one would imagine that Everton would be looking for further owners on the basis of that. John Textor, by all accounts, is using the Rain Group to market his stake in Crystal Palace. The Rain Group, of course, famously were involved in both the sales of Chelsea and Manchester United.
Yeah, interesting that at least one tabloid today is using the word administration potential about Everton. Do we know if John Textor has got enough to buy Everton now? Because if he doesn't, he's going to need to sell his 48% stake in Crystal Palace fairly sharpish if he's to raise the money to buy Everton Football Club, isn't he?
Yeah. Does he have the money? Yes, but he needs to sell before he can buy in order to satisfy Premier League rules anyway. Right. He has been spectacularly successful, so I don't think the funding is an issue. It's whether he wants to take over all of the existing debt and pay for the completion costs. As far as the stadium is concerned, in my view, I think in the view of quite a few observers, you end up paying too much for Everton based on where they are. And also, you then have to look at things on an operational level. Clearly, there needs to be something take place with regards to the recruitment of players, which is going to be an expensive exercise as well.
From a Palace point of view, Kieran, you talk about Steve Parish and the rocket boost, and God knows you know better than I do that there have been rumours for a while now that he has his eye on bigger investment, shall we say. But my problem with that theory is that John Textor has made it quite plain recently that his big mistake, as we've discussed, was not buying Crystal Palace outright, because he owns 48% of the club but has no control over the future of the club. The reason he couldn't buy it outright is because Steve Parish refused to sell his shares, and I think Steve Parish will want to remain in control of anything that happens at Palace in the near future anyway. So it just makes me wonder who out there wants to buy 48% of a football club, albeit a football club that might be about to be more successful. But why would anybody want to buy 48% of a football club and have the same issue as Textor, that they won't be in control of what happens with their money?
I think that's an absolutely valid question. And remember, you've got the other two American investors as well.
Yeah, Harris and Blitzer, yeah.
Now, Harris and Blitzer, what are their ambitions? They have been very much sort of silent partners at Crystal Palace. If Textor's shares and the other two, if they sell their shares, then somebody's buying 80-odd%. that would give you an awful lot of leverage in terms of being able to deliver. Also, Steve Parish could be a very good front of house person in the same way that Amanda Staveley has been with respect to Newcastle United. So people sometimes have to put their egos aside. If this meant that Crystal Palace could become a very sizable club in London, I would imagine that Steve Parish would want what is best for Crystal Palace. And it will probably be quite good for Steve Parish as well, because if they do offer to buy him out, I'm sure he'll be very well rewarded.
See, now, I don't know if you've done that deliberately, Kieran, but by making the comparison between Amanda Staveley in Newcastle and Steve Parish in Crystal Palace, you're going to set the rumour mill going, yeah? You're going to have a lot of Palace fans who listen to this as we speak. Martin and Princess Julian will be looking through their books of geography to see which country in the United Arab Emirates don't own a football club. You just reassured them, Kieran, you chose Amanda Staveley completely out of the blue. It could have been any other front of house person, couldn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Two Man United stories, Kieran, and they're interesting stories. The first one indicates that Jim Ratcliffe's management style seems to be much more hands-on than the Glazers ever were.
Yes, Kim Jong-Jim appears to think that Manchester United employees are skivers. Yeah. They've been told that they've got a week to decide whether to voluntarily resign from their positions. So by all accounts, an email has gone out to staff and said, everybody's got to return to work, no more working from home, because the inference from that, we don't trust you.
Yeah.
Which I think is fairly insulting.
Yeah.
A mix of working from home and going, what are you doing when you're traveling to an office? You're just using an hour or 2 hours of your time a day. Then you spend, a good half hour talking about the latest episode of Married at First Sight Australia, when you could be working. So, I find it, I genuinely find it insulting, and it's very sort of old school. Not making people redundant, but effectively saying these are going to be the terms and conditions of employment. And if you don't want that, then do one. So I worked out the numbers, because I think Manchester United's problems, I don't think it's caused by Sarah and Dave, who are working in the back office. I don't think that's the reason why they've not won a trophy for the last 10 years. The average salary for a player at Manchester United is £8.94 million, based on my analysis of the data. I've got no issue with that. I've always defended the rights of a footballer to earn in a talent market. People in the entertainment world that will be earning those sums of money. I've never walked out. I didn't walk out of Toy Story saying, I would have enjoyed Toy Story more if Tom Hanks got a little bit less money for that. So, I think the argument against footballers' wages very much comes from a snobbish point of view, but it will cost you, I think it's 265 jobs for every player. Wow. So, and if this isn't a football show, could be argued that the recruitment at Manchester United, and I won't name the players, but there's been quite a few very, very expensive transfers on players on very large sums of money who have not delivered for whatever reason. So to effectively target people who are probably in Old Trafford and in the London office, 2 or 3 days a week, saying, well, you're the problem at the club. You've got to come in 5 days a week, and then things are going to improve. I think that's naive, and I think it's indicative of a management style of do as I say rather than do as I do, because Jim Ratcliffe's not there 5 days a week because he's a tax exile. He can't be there 5 days a week. Otherwise, he'd have to pay tax, which he clearly doesn't want to do.
You've been reading Private Eye too long, Kieran, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we've already seen that email a couple of weeks ago from Jim Ratcliffe berating the staff for the untidy state of Old Trafford and the offices, which, if you're going to berate somebody for the state of Old Trafford, you need to berate the Glazers, because it's, we saw that humiliating thing at the end of the Arsenal game when, pundits, broadcasters getting soaked through the holes in the roof. But I don't think Jim Ratcliffe will care how this is viewed one way or the other. But is this being sold as a money-saving exercise? Or is this being sold as, right, this will get rid of the deadwood and we can get better people in? Or is it simply someone stamping as authority on the club?
I think there's an element of all three. They've employed a set of management consultants, who I suspect won't be on the average wage, to do a review of operational efficiencies. Now, I've worked in business long enough. It's getting rid of people's jobs. Not people are not described as employees. They are described as costs. And this is where I feel uncomfortable, because I lived in Manchester for 40 years. I've got mates who have worked at Old Trafford. Could they work harder? Do you know, I don't know a single person who could possibly say that, actually, I could probably work a bit harder. I could work longer hours, but why should people be expected to do this? Yeah, this sort of, this viewpoint I find very strange. I think there is an element of, look, we're Ineos, we're now in charge. Look how efficient we were when we did the Tour de France. Although that involved handing over envelopes of something or other, didn't it?
Kieran, we've interviewed Old Trafford staff on the show. We know how hard they work, because they've told us that they're working. They're there every hour God sends, and they're not being paid for a lot of those hours that God sends. And this is one of those things where you kind of wish there was a bit of old-fashioned 1970s trade unions. Because I'm guessing most of those staff that are being asked to voluntarily resign, which is an outrage, because, fine, offer voluntary redundancy if you want to do that, and then people can take it or not. But voluntarily resign implies that you're going to get rid of them if they don't. And I'm guessing that a lot of the staff at Old Trafford won't be part of the union, so this can happen with impunity. It's not. If I was a Man United fan, I'd you always say be careful what you wish for. This episode of The Price of Football is brought to you by the AI-powered workspace Notion.
I need Notion on a day-to-day basis. I've always got 10 things to do, and I've always got people shouting at me. So Notion helps me to organise myself. It turns knowledge into action, from summarising meeting notes and automatically generating action items to getting answers to any question in seconds. If you can think it, you can make it. And Notion is for everyone. Whether you're a Fortune 500 company, a freelance designer, starting a new startup, or a student juggling classes and clubs.
And if you're any of those things, you can try Notion for free when you go to notion.com/priceoffootball. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/priceoffootball, and start turning ideas into action. That's notion.com/priceoffootball.
Families have a lot going on. Let Ollie help manage the mental load with new cognitive help supplements for everyone 4 and up, like delicious Lolly Focus Pops or Lolly Mellow Pops for kids. And for parents, try 3 new Brainy Chews to help you focus, chill out, or get energized. Find these cognitive health buddies for the whole fam at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
There's another issue as well with Ineos, Kieran, and UEFA have been predicting for as long as we've been doing this pod that as the multi-club model gets more and more popular, we are going to have to find resolutions to clubs taking part in the European competitions when they're in the same ownership. And this is what we've got next year, haven't we, with Manchester United and Nice?
That's right. I mean, historically, you were not allowed to own 2 clubs who had qualified for European competition, full stop. But the RB group somehow managed to circumvent that issue. There are issues now as far as Manchester United and Jim Ratcliffe's French club are concerned, because they are now in the same competition. And what UEFA appear to be hinting at is you've got 2 choices. A, you divest your ownership. Yeah. So we saw that with Aston Villa, and we saw that with Brighton last season in terms of their owners. They had to relinquish ownership of one of the clubs, and both the owners did that. Or the alternative is that you do not play in the same competition. So one of the clubs potentially would have to drop down to the Europa Conference, presumably would be replaced by a club in the conference who would be uplifted to the Europa League itself. How that would be done, on what basis, is presumably for UEFA to decide, unless UEFA say, well, you can make that choice yourself, in which case one would imagine, as Manchester United is the more high-profile club, they would be in the more high-profile competition, which would, I suspect, make the French fans somewhat aggrieved. But they don't appear to be particularly highly opinionated with regards to praise of Jim Ratcliffe's and his merry men to date.
I got home rather late, or Ellie and I got home rather late last night, and watching Sky, the programme they have, Back Pages tomorrow, yesterday, or whatever it's called, and both journalists involved rather arrogantly assuming that there's only one solution to this, and that is that you drop Nice into the Europa League. You don't toss a coin. You don't treat the two clubs with equal value. To say that UEFA would be mad if they were to do this, but as you say, Kieran, there are a lot of Nice fans who wouldn't be too happy. I'll be interested to see how UEFA work this one out, basically. Some bad news from Spain, Kieran, for us legacy fans.
Yes. So a Spanish court has ruled that UEFA and FIFA were wrong to ban clubs from joining the European Super League. The argument that was put forward was that UEFA and FIFA had both said, if you join a rival tournament, we will not let your players play internationals, we will not let you play in any competitions which we sanction, and so on. And the Spanish court's ruling appears to say, well, actually, that's a breach of power. And I think that could be argued. I mean, my view is that if you want to go and join an alternative competition, off you go. But don't expect to go and play in the Premier League. Don't expect to play in La Liga. If you want a competition which is based on being part of a franchise, you're perfectly entitled to do that. So that appears to be the case. Now, both A22, who are the public relations agency, who've been very quiet for 6 months or so, that they are claiming this is a fantastic victory and that there's now loads of clubs who want to go and join their competition. The Premier League clubs, the Sneaky Six, have publicly said, when the original Super League said, we're never going to do that again. Well, we've learned our lesson. German clubs won't join it because German fans will simply not allow that to happen. So if you have a European competition, which is going to be run by Spain, Italy, France, possibly, how is that going to be hugely successful? Because it effectively becomes a Southern Europe competition. I just don't quite see how it's going to generate the revenues. But Real Madrid are delighted with the news, as are Barcelona. One of those clubs is extremely well run, Real Madrid, and the other one is a basket case in the case of Barcelona. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that there's a qualitative issue. It's more to do with Perez empire building at Madrid. So once again, wait and see. But this gives further indication to my view that the comments made by Richard Masters in terms of the door is ajar to Premier League matches taking place overseas. I think that if we've got a European competition as a rival to UEFA's competition, that's going to reduce the money in UEFA, probably reduce the money in the other competition as well. It's going to increase the desire of owners to maximise revenues from their Premier League franchises as much as they can.
Now, we do have to mention the Lucas Paqueta story because it is a big news story, but we probably shouldn't talk about it too much until it's actually resolved. Although interesting to note that West Ham are furious about the timing of the announcement from the FA, which came while West Ham were unveiling their new manager. And they said they could have waited for that to happen, or they could have done it before. But he's been charged by the FA for allegedly getting booked deliberately. And I think there's a distinction to be made here, Kieran, because there are some people who are conflating Paqueta's story with other players who have been charged with gambling on games. And there's no indication here that he's making money himself. It's just the charge is that he's helping other people to make money. You presume he's getting a tap from it. But some of the people who are saying, well, cut him some slack, there's a mental health issue here. I don't think it's the same as having a gambling addiction, personally, and I've already just broken my own injunction by saying we shouldn't talk about it too much, but off you go.
Yeah, in looking at it from a financial angle, Paqueta was reported by a bookmaking company, and the bookmakers are excellent in terms of monitoring the nature of bets, the location of bets, and so on. And by all accounts, there was a concentration of bets being placed from somewhere, I think just off Brazil, with regards to Paqueta getting yellow carded in individual games. And the reason why I think this is different to the charges that we've seen historically against Ivan Toney, Joey Barton, other players who subsequently had bans, was that they had no skin in those particular bets. What this appears to be indicative of is spot fixing. And there's one thing to do spot fixing with regards to yellow cards. Also, something we spoke about a couple of weeks ago with what was happening in the Australian A-League, where players were accused of, again, it was a yellow card offence, which is something which is easy for an individual player. And it comes down to the integrity of the game. And if you then say, well, we're going to allow people to do that, what's the next step? Number of corners. And I think famously, some of the players used to admit, 20 or 30 years ago, that they would, before the rules were introduced, that they would bet on who would get the first throw-in.
Wimbledon.
And then they would deliberately kick the ball out at kickoff.
Wimbledon players admitted that afterwards.
Yeah. So it's a difficult issue. The irony of Paqueta being, I think he was reported by Betway, who are West Ham sponsors.
Yeah.
They are right to do what they've done. They are right to report if this has been. If only bookmakers were just as keen to identify people who are clearly spending too much money at bookmakers as they are for when bookmakers are losing money. I would cut them a hell of a lot of slack.
Yeah, well, they're able to do it. That's the problem, isn't it? Talking of sponsors, Kieran, I'm trying to think of the word. There must be a word that's one above mystery. But whatever the word for one above mystery is, Wolves' new sponsor and their new kit is surrounded by one above mystery.
Yes. I think it's fair to say that public relations from Wolves owners Fosun in the last week or two, because there's a separate issue with regards to ticket prices. I think if you're a disabled fan, welcome to a 170% increase in what we're going to demand for you. Average increase is 17%. And Jeff Shue, or whatever his name is, there's a say, suck it up. But Wolves' new main sponsor, Dap Dip, has agreed a deal to be the front of shirt sponsor, which is fine because the Premier League is not outlawing gambling sponsors for another couple of years. Apparently, gambling problems won't exist until 2026, so therefore there's no need to ban them until that year. And they did this. I think they had one follower on Facebook and 0 followers on Twitter when they signed. Now, it could be argued that, well, the best way to get new sponsors, to get new followers, is to have a relationship with a football club. But it does appear to be yet another white label sponsor who's not interested in the domestic market. And again, let's be honest, Premier League, global product. So therefore, should we? Chevrolet never were interested in selling cars in the UK, and they happily sponsored Manchester United for many years. And they've now got a new kit deal as well, kit manufacturer, from a company which was created in the last 7 days.
Wow.
Now, we've had, we had Tom from Castor on, and he was talking about supply chain and just how long it is. And you're normally designing the kit in October for the release the following August. So it looks as if this new manufacturer has found a way around global logistic challenges. And Fosun has said, you're absolute geniuses and we're going to sign up with you. And none of this passes the smell test.
It doesn't, Kieran. And this is why I'm going to say we'll be talking about this next week in more detail, or the week after that in more detail, because at the moment we have no more detail to give anybody. It's just out of the blue came this boast of, a company no one's ever heard of is going to be splashed across the shirts made by a company that didn't exist 6 days ago. And all this is happening while you say the mood music amongst Wolves fans is absolutely terrible because of what they're trying to do with ticket sales. We had several messages on social media from Wolves fans saying that they think Wolves want to be the first club to phase season tickets out altogether. So it'd be really interesting to hear, and I know I say this about a lot of stories every week, but it'd be fascinating to hear from Wolves. If somebody from Wolves wants to come on and big up their new sponsor and their new kit company, we'd love to hear from them. But I'd be more interested in hearing from Wolves fans about their perception of what's going on. I'd also quite like to hear from Inverness, Caledonian, Thistle fans, and I'd like to hear from their board as to why their board is surprised that Inverness, Caledonian, Thistle fans are unhappy about the move of its training base.
Yes, they've been relegated. They are moving their training facilities and sharing with Kilty Hearts, which I think is around about 140 miles away. Apparently, there's a lack of housing in Inverness. Yeah, there's a song about Inverness, but I don't think it involved housing.
There's a couple of limericks about Inverness as well, Kieran. They definitely don't involve housing.
So what the board have said is that if we want to attract players because of housing shortage issues, yes, Inverness is quite far north, we're going to effectively create a nomad club where the players will train further south. I hope I've got my geography there correct. Apologies if I haven't. And this will allow us to recruit players who will then effectively commute to Inverness. The reaction of Inverness fans is pretty outraged. Just like many people, they take the view that the club is a representation of the town, and the board are effectively saying the town's not a desirable place to be. And they go, well, yeah, we're proud Invernessians. I don't know how Nessies. I don't know how they refer to themselves. And you can understand. So 200 fans attended the meeting, and they expressed their dissatisfaction, to put it quite mildly. And some have said, if that's the attitude of the club, then how can we vote? Well, we can vote with our feet. Season tickets for up renewal. We will consider our options, I think is the polite way of describing that.
Yeah. I think even with my limited geographical knowledge, Kieran, I think you're fairly safe to assume that most places are south of Inverness.
Yes.
But that it brings us back to the central problem, which we have spoken to Neil Doncaster about, the head honcho of Scottish football, the economics of being a Highland club, because Scotland is a very big country, and in the north of the country, the road links are only just catching up. So there are economic difficulties in being a club in the Highlands, but you don't solve those difficulties by moving half the club south. It seems to be the wrong way around, and you can understand why the fans are so unhappy, because it's part of their identity. The Highlanders have a strong historical identity anyway, but the football club up there is the same as football clubs everywhere. It helps with that identity, and any suggestion that identity will be diluted by moving even the training base 136 miles away, because the logical extension of that is, well, I'll tell you what, lads, let's move the ground 136 miles away. That will save us on a bit of travel every week. It doesn't make sense. So again, Cali fans, if you want to get in touch, I sound like Jim White on TalkSport. If you want to get in touch with us, Cali fans, get in touch with me, not Simon Jordan. He won't know where you are. The Chernin Group, Kieran, has invested £30 million in classic football shirts. They're a British company founded in 2006 by two students, and they sell authentic kit from around the world. And Kieran, you had a quick chat with Greg Bettinelli, a partner at Chernin, about why they're making this investment.
This episode is supported by FX's Clipped, the scandalous story of the 2014 Clippers owner's racist remarks captured on tape and heard around the world. The series charts the tape's impact on a dysfunctional basketball organization striving to win against their reputation as the most cursed team in the league. Starring Lawrence Fishburne, Jackie Weaver, Cleopatra Coleman, and Ed O'Neill. FX's Clipped, streaming June 4th, only on Hulu.
Hi, I'm Steve Lamack, and every week I'm joined by Music Ally's Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge, on The Price of Music, the weekly podcast all about the money behind the music industry. In each episode, we discuss the very latest goings-on in the music business and dig into the finances behind the big stories.
So whether you're a music lover who just wants to know more about what really goes on in the industry, or you're an aspiring musician, manager or label owner who wants some inside knowledge on how Spotify's financial model really works, or what the future holds for independent live music venues, this is a show for you.
Subscribe to The Price of Music in your podcast app now. See you soon.
Hi, Greg. Thanks so much for coming on the show. just to give us our listeners a bit of background, how have you ended up as an investor in the football industry, and where are you now?
Yeah, so I work for a growth equity firm based in the United States called the Chernin Group. We call it TCG because we like our short things here. I'm based in Los Angeles. We also have offices in New York and San Francisco. And all we do as a firm is invest in what we call enduring consumer businesses. So we put capital to work, whether they're pounds or dollars, with the idea of growing consumer businesses and businesses that just cater to them and that fans and individuals can fall in love with. And so sports is a passion category, and we are doing a lot of work and investing in and around sports. And it's hard not to be an investor in sports if you don't spend a lot of time talking about football. And I'll call soccer when I'm talking about America, and football when I'm talking abroad or about everywhere outside America. But football is the global game, and it's hard not to be a sophisticated investor who loves consumer businesses and not spend time talking about football.
So have you looked at it? Because you've not even actually invested in a football club itself. Were you given the opportunity, or have you heard some of our podcasts and you ran away screaming, saying, I don't want to touch an industry where everybody's losing money?
Yeah, I don't know if it's fair to admit that the price of football has had a lot of influence on how I think about football. But between you and Kevin, I now spend a little bit more time paying attention to Crystal Palace and Brighton. At the same time, I haven't listened to all 500, but I definitely listened to several hundred. And so for one, it's truly an honor to be part of this. And there is a little bit of you guys in me. And so you'll see that. But as investors, and I think you talk a lot about private equity investing in global football, and we can even narrow it to talk about England specifically. And so we were part of those. We have been one of those firms who has spent a lot of time looking at the viability and opportunity to invest in football clubs, both from what I'll call a minority passive point of view, meaning we put money in alongside of another lead investor and having them run the club, or actually thinking about taking control would be an aggressive term, but buying a majority of the club and then bringing in our own team to operate it, whether it's a CEO and a head of football, and think about it as a more strategic investment, how we would do. And I think, over the past couple of years, we have looked at a dozen plus clubs, and obviously can't be specific, but I'll say everything from clubs in the Big Seven to clubs that are in the National League and everything in between. And there's clearly a lot of Americans involved in football. In Los Angeles, where I live, I can go to my Starbucks and almost have several FA Cup ties that could be played between the people in line in the West Los Angeles Starbucks that I go to, from National League all the way through the Big Six. I think we have a pretty good understanding, but we just got to a point where we knew we were in love with football and the fanaticism and the passion that involves football, but have not fallen in love with the business of owning a football club. And you spend a couple hours a week talking about that. And as investors, it's very difficult for, I think, two things: to invest in businesses that are difficult to value because of promotion relegation, difficult to value because of the fact that other than a couple of clubs, and if you throw out player transfers and player purchasing, nobody makes any money from their operating businesses. And the fact that right now, a large number of clubs in England, whether they're admitting it or not, would take investment money from outsiders, whether full control or minority investment. And therefore, you just don't have a lot of scarcity. So look, we are rightly or wrongly in the business of making money and returning money to our investors. And if everything in the market is for sale, how can you ever get a premium to what you invested if you're competing against everybody else who needs those same investment dollars? And that's very different than in the US, where there's much more scarcity around our professional sports assets. Now, they are much more expensive, but there's a reason for that, because there hasn't been a case where there hasn't been a buyer for most of US sports franchises. So that kind of led us to, how else can we think about and invest in football without owning a team?
And I imagine also in terms of valuations in US sport, you don't have the spectre of relegation, which, as you highlighted, investors want certainty. And a part of the joy of being a football fan is the misery and the avoidance of misery that's associated with relegation and relegation scraps. But certainly when I've done any times of valuation, and it's actually quite reassuring to hear what you've said, I'll talk to people and say, there is no such thing as a football club valley. It's a pure punt, unless you are looking very much at the completely de-risked clubs at the very top tier of the Premier League who are going to stay at.
That's right, Kieran. I would say those 6 or 7 clubs, and maybe now there's 10 if you go down the big 6, Newcastle, let's add West Ham, Aston Villa now, maybe Palace, but in that group, there's about 10 clubs that go into each year thinking they have a better chance to make it to Europe than to get relegated. And we're talking Premier League clubs. I think those clubs can trade at 3 to 10 times revenue. And I think anyone else below, if you look at the deals, are trading between 1 and 2.5 times revenue. So, look at next year, we could probably name 12 teams that should stay up and 8 teams that could go down from the Premier League, and it works its way down to every division.
Right, absolutely. So you've decided not to buy a football club. So what have you invested in as part of your love of the game?
Yeah, and this is true story. This time last year, a little earlier, I was in London. We were looking at teams, and I remember going to an Arsenal game at Emirates, and I didn't remember it was warm out because everyone was wearing short sleeves. And I noticed that they were all wearing football shirts. We call them soccer jerseys, but we'll say football shirts. And it was just something, and I had spent a lot of time as an investor in the US looking at kind of subculture categories like sneakers or streetwear, which have caught on to be more than just, there's kind of a retro element, there's a collectible element. It's this wearable, collectible concert t-shirts, you could argue, tell similar stories. I know you're a big concert guy, but you could remember concerts you went to and you buy shirts. And I think football shirts are the same. So I can tell if someone's wearing, a new fan might be wearing a Saka Arsenal third, or an older fan might be wearing an Henry shirt from when he played. And I just noticed that every fan had a different shirt from a different era with a different player. And it just stuck in my head. And later, in another trip to London, I ended up going to the store on Commercial, or it's near Aldgate East Tube Station, called Classic Football Shirts. And as a consumer investor, I shop. I go, just this morning, I was at St. Pancras in King's Cross Station, just looking at people in line as they're going to either, I guess you go either to Leeds, or if you're going to Paris on the Eurostar. And I just observed consumers for a living. And whenever I see people lined up outside of a door, that usually means or a queue, as you would say. When people are queued up, there's usually business opportunity because of that. Either there's so much friction and everyone's angering at the ticket agent at the airport or the bus stop, or people want something that's for sale. And that day I happened to notice that there was 30 people outside the Classic Football Shirt store waiting to get in on a Sunday morning for no reason other than to buy football shirts from the past. And I couldn't get over, there wasn't a special release. It was just demand. It turned out that business, which I think you're alluding to, which we now invested in recently, is a global thing, and football shirts are a big thing. And at the point, I knew they were something, but not what they are. And so really the adaptation was we should be spending a lot of time thinking about football as a global business, instead of being the business of owning a club, maybe we want to be in the business of serving fans and providing or finding businesses that cater to them. And football shirts was a way to invest in that, and something we're super excited about.
Absolutely amazing. So how did the negotiations go? How do you approach a retro shirt company, or are they looking out for you?
Yeah, well, I think this example, there was some serendipity about an opportunity, but in reality, as investors, if there's something you like, we will figure out a way to get in front of you. So if the Price of Football was looking to raise capital and expand, and we liked it, or we would figure out how to get to you. And so this was, in this example, I think that upon my return to Los Angeles from that trip, I had someone on my team say, we need to reach out to these guys. Let's see if we can get a meeting. I knew they were based in Manchester. And so I said, just tell them Greg was in line, loved the store, bought this specific shirt. I don't remember what it was. I think it was an Arsenal shirt. And that it was the JVC shirt with the yellow and black. What is that? The 91? I think 91, yeah, third. Maybe, I don't remember which one. That was the one I bought. And I can only wear black football shirts because I don't look good in other colors. But and so we reached out to them and built a relationship with Matt and Doug, who at the time those were the founders, and they've been running this business in Manchester since 2006. And I think they were realizing that their business had reached an interesting point where there was a really go time for them, but they needed the capital and support to help do that. So, we love to invest with founders and have them keep running the business, but we provide global support, capital, infrastructure, and the idea of bringing businesses broader than where they are. So the idea of taking that concept and bringing it to the US is something we're super excited about. So it actually, sometimes it doesn't work, and founders and owners don't want anything to do with investors because we might be bad, angry people. But a lot of times we are aligned in what we can do. And the idea is that we will co-invest, we will invest with them and support their growth. And the idea of creating something much bigger than they have now. And it's such a great story. I mean, these are two blokes who were at university together in Manchester, and one's an Arsenal fan and one's a Manchester United fan, started selling shirts out of their dorm room and built what now is a brand leader with, tens of millions of turnover, serving 100 countries. And it's just a phenomenal story. So it's really something to be excited to be part of.
That's amazing. So there's is there a scarcity element, would you say, in football shirts, given that you're buying historic assets and given the emotional investment that so many fans have in the game? Is that keeping prices high? And do you see that trend continuing?
Yeah, so it's not, and I'll take a slight step back, because what's unique, and as we got into this category, and it's very different than as an American sports fan. So obviously you all know this, but the idea that each year a club releases 3 or 4 new shirts with the intent of selling them to their fans, and the fans are okay with that, makes zero sense as an American. Where the San Francisco 49ers, who is my team, has worn this same jersey since I was a kid. The red one and the white one. The San Francisco Giants was my baseball team. The same uniform that I remember when I was a kid, and I'm not that young anymore. But I can't imagine the idea of the Giants or the 49ers would be releasing 3 or 4 new jerseys every year. So the fact that that is the way, and I know in a recent show, you talked about how there's business where Adidas and Puma and Nike are buying rights and they're incented to sell. And so what happens is, if you're a fan, let's just say there are hundreds of clubs in dozens of countries. Countries do every other year, but so every year there are 500 to 1,000 new shirts, new styles that are introduced for the biggest clubs in the world. Consumers are changing in the fact that they actually want choice. So they want what's new, but they also want what's from the past. And nobody in the current way, if you went to a JD Sports website or the Liverpool website, only thing available is this year's stuff. And so it's really an output of just the inefficiencies in the market from a consumer perspective. It makes a ton of sense from the club and manufacturer side, but the consumer, it makes no sense. Is why can't I buy the 2020 Manchester United shirt? And the second is, it's not just the great shirts of the past, the 1982 England shirt or the 93 Liverpool shirt or the West Germany shirt from 1988. Those are iconic collectibles. And if you can find them, they're priceless, or, they're worth, and then if a player wore them in a match, it's worth, tens of thousands to millions of pounds. But it's also about just getting the 2021 Leeds shirt that I can't find anywhere, but it might be 20 pounds on the Classic Football Shirts website. So I think what we've brought is, there is the collectible nature, and that's about half the business, is this called them classics, or hard to find shirts that are likely more vintage and or were never worn, but they were sitting in your drawer or your closet. And I'm guessing you have dozens of football shirts that you've collected over the years. And some people sell them, some people don't, but no one really throws them away, right? I don't know, right? And so it's something unique in regards to that. So we serve the classic market, and then this, what we call more of the outlet model, or even clearance would be a term that you would use here. It's where do you get the shirts that aren't today, but they're from recent years. So it's the new shirts that were candidly not sold. And this time of the year, here we are in May, almost to June, the clubs are looking to clear out all their inventory so they can start selling you the new product in July. So right now, historically, what Classic Football Shirts would do is they'd be buying inventory from the clubs and manufacturers, then holding it, and then re-releasing it next year when suddenly what was a product that we call dead stock in the industry is now wanted because no one is selling. So dead stock moves to hot stock. And so it's this interesting model. And so that's how we evolved in servicing both the classic and the new. And as a result of that, the big manufacturers said, hey, you have people who are buying the classics, you have people who are buying the clearance. Why don't you sell the new too? And so now we sell the new with the brands like Adidas. You could buy an Arsenal or Manchester United, or a deal with Puma and you can buy the Man City shirt. So that's kind of how that evolves. It's very special, very uniquely positioned business.
That is very unique indeed. Absolutely amazing. You've sort of alluded to a lot of American investors being interested in football because of the scarcity issues. When you look at something such as what Reynolds and McElhenney have done with Wrexham, do you tip your hat in their direction in terms of the amazing brand that they have created?
Rob's in Los Angeles and Ryan is in a lot of time in New York and spends time in Canada, obviously. So look, they are storytellers. And at the end of the day, football is stories, right? We don't think of it that way. They just happen to be stories that aren't written. They're stories that are played on the pitch. They have figured out how to tell a story about a game, a location, and a division, candidly. When they were in the National and even League One, an American can't tell you the difference between the three, and they really can't tell the difference other than the Premier League. And so what they have done is just special. And to do it in such a positive way, because football, there's bad luck. And yes, they spent a little bit more money than other clubs in their divisions, but there are a lot of clubs in the Championship who spent a lot of money that didn't get promoted. There are a lot of clubs in League One that can't get promoted relative to their peers. And then there's an Ipswich, and then there's a Wrexham. And so I do think just those stories are natural. And they are an important word in all of football is authenticity. And Rob and Ryan are extraordinarily authentic. And the people of Wrexham, who I've got to know through the show, and I've been lucky enough to go to one match, they're special people, as is every other of the 92 plus 20, 112 clubs, all have interesting people and stories to tell. Now, can someone else tell the same story that they did with Wrexham? I don't think so. So now the American copycats are coming in. And, you look at a Birmingham, you look at other places where, hey, isn't it cool to own a football club? Maybe, but it's really hard. And it's very difficult to control what happens between the lines. And so it's hard not now where they go next. You talk to Rob thinks Wrexham could and should be a Premier League club, and they want to build a huge stadium. And the only thing I know is a lot of Americans go to Wrexham to watch football and buy their merchandise and look at the sponsors that Wrexham has. They have better sponsors than all but 5 clubs in the better, meaning from a market cap of, they have United Airlines and they had partnered with, I think Expedia or one of those brands. Those are top 5 club sponsors. There's no Premier League club with an American Airlines or United Airlines sponsor. So it just tells you a little bit about the stories they're creating.
Incredible. And I believe you've just been to see a match, which we always market as the most expensive or the most rewarding match in world football. What was your experience of Wembley for the playoff final between Leeds and Southampton?
Yeah, so this is the first time I'd been to Wembley to watch a global football. I had been to an NFL game, which is a totally different. We can talk about why fans can't drink beers and all that, which also makes no sense. But the idea of 85,000 people having exactly 42,500 Leeds fans and 42,500 Southampton fans is just something you would never see in the US. The closest thing would be a Super Bowl, but Super Bowl is all corporate people. And so fans really don't go to the Super Bowl. It's all people who pretend to be fans who got free tickets from the marketing agencies and the NFL. But to hear, and I was telling someone this, I had a pretty good seat, which I was lucky to get. And I couldn't tell what was going on because I could hear the Southampton fan and Leeds fans singing at the same time. And it just was noise. But the pressure, you could see it, especially after Leeds gave up an relatively early goal. The fans went very quiet, and you could just see in their face the expectation is, oh my God, we're Leeds, and this is what's going to happen to us. And I know the same thing would have happened with Southampton, and you can just see the emotions. And I think you could even see it on the players' faces, like the coaches pacing and just the level of, there are no games like that in the US, because if you lose a Super Bowl, all it means is you get the 31st pick in the draft the next year, and you go on. And it's a phenomenon. And I have, as a sports fan, I think there are a few places I've been. I've been to a Leeds match. I've been to a Liverpool match. Just the atmosphere, a game like that at Wembley, it's unlike any sports event that even we have in the United States. Nothing compares to. The only thing I can comment is if you've ever been to a heavyweight prize fight, right when the two gloves meet at the very beginning, the crowd's electric. That was what it was like at kickoff for that game. It was just something that was really special.
It was very, very intense indeed. Absolutely. Just one final question. We've got the World Cup coming to the US and Canada and Mexico in 2026. What do you think European fans can expect? Because I'm about to apply for tickets myself. What can European fans expect, which might be different to their match day experience historically at this side of the pond?
Yeah, it's great. And we have a lot of global football happening in the United States. So this year we have Copa America that has Brazil and Argentina. So Messi will be playing here, obviously. Next year we have Club World Cup, which will be the first time that there are truly competitive, I'm using quotes, matches for European clubs in the United States. We always get the summer tours, right? And some of you have come and seen those. I think Americans seeing real club football at that level will be, but the World Cup, we had it in 94. One of the most iconic football shirts of all time is 1994 US, that denim, which is an Adidas kit, which is now one of probably the most collectible football shirt in America for what it's worth. But a couple things. One, America is a big country. And so if you think that you can follow England, I don't know who's playing where yet, but you can go from New York to Dallas to Los Angeles, and then, maybe I'll go down to Canada or go up to Canada. It is a big country. So from flying one side to the other is a 6-hour flight. The other is Americans are going to consume this event like nothing you had ever seen. So therefore, unless you get tickets from the federations, they're going to cost you exponentially more money than you can imagine. So if you think, wow, England, I don't know what they're going to cost here, £100 for a ticket. That ticket will be 10 to 20 times that amount if you bought it in the secondary market. I think you will see, and the third would be, you will be very envious of our stadium. So you have the Spurs Stadium, which I think you've been to, is an amazing building. The other 19 stadiums in the Premier League, including Man City, including Emirates, they would be the bottom 30. They would be 31st and 32nd in the NFL. And so there will be a substantial amount of envy. And so seeing just the lavishness of the American sports experience, I think will be pretty overwhelming to European fans, unless you're a supporter of Spurs or Real Madrid or Barca or PSG who play in these very dynamic stadiums. And then lastly, I just think, who knows what's going to happen with 48 teams. I think that will be, it's a lot of games. In LA, I think SoFi, which is our $6 billion stadium, it's unlike anything. I think they're hosting 8 to 12 matches, which just seems like a lot of football. So I'm super excited. I haven't told my wife, can I take 5 weeks off and do like the head of FIFA does, where he tries to go remember that guy who went to every game at Qatar? He's not going to be able to do that in the US. And so, but it will be special. And then, it's hopefully England will, the English US final would be pretty good for television ratings for sure.
Absolutely brilliant. Greg, thank you so much for giving up your time. You're flying back to the States soon, is that right? I'm actually going to, don't tell my wife, but I'm going to stick around for the Champions League final on Saturday. And then I fly back Sunday morning. But yeah, it's a special place. And every American's favorite city outside the United States is London. But now I've got a lot more exposure. I know the rail, by looking at the rail stops, I can tell which division each one of those cities' clubs are in. And I haven't made it my way very much south. So I need to get Brighton and I need to get Southampton and I want to go to Plymouth and maybe all the way even I guess Plymouth is the furthest southwest, right? But there's a lot of football south, but I have experience at north and it's a great place. So I'm happy to come anytime. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Safe journey back. My pleasure.
Very be interesting, Kieran. But I could tell by the tone of your voice, really, you just want to talk about the kits, not the money they're being made out of them.
You're absolutely right. It was fascinating talking to Greg and, first of all, the two guys that set up Classic Football Shirts, the fact that they want to take it to the next level, the fact that they have now expanded into not nearly new, but recent shirts. Yeah. So, if you are Puma or Nike or Adidas and you've got your 24, 25 shirts out, you won't find a shirt from 2 years ago in the club shop. And they are going to now provide that service. They're also going to be selling new shirts. So you'll be able to they're picking up all of the excess stock. So they're providing a useful service for the manufacturers, especially for those kits, which for whatever reason haven't sold. But listening to Greg and his love of football shirts, which came through, also the fact that he wants to invest in football. He talks about football as being part of the consumer group, and the way that he observes people queuing for things and saying, right, if there's 100 people queuing up for that, it must have some value. And that's how he got involved. Yeah. He was outside the shop. Okay, what are those people doing? And it was football shirt nerds like us, to a large degree, who at the market was fascinating. But a lot of money is being put in, and private equity, investors, they don't put money in unless they think that there's money to be made go on the exit door as well. So clearly they think this is a growth market, and they are, desirables, they are collectibles, they are appealing to that person that really wants wants an Arsenal Invincibles away shirt because that was a special moment in their life and so on.
I haven't really got the collecting gene, Kieran. I do have a sort of half-hearted collection of small miniature model flowers, oddly, but I don't go out. I just, if I see one in a shop, I'll buy it for £5. But if I was to collect anything, I would collect pre-1900 football shirts. I don't know how many of them are out there, but some of the colour schemes of football shirts back in the old day, salmon blue and pink stripes. There should be more clubs now with salmon blue. I think that was Everton. Everton fans will tell me. Last story, Kieran, is a story that will make Wolverhampton fans weep. And it's about Blackburn and their season ticket prices.
That's right. It is 30 years since Blackburn Rovers won the Premier League. Wow. And Jack Walker was probably the first ever investor, the first ever club owner who decided to go and spend a load of money to accelerate a club that we started to talk about. You always knew who your chairman was, but you rarely knew who the chairman of other clubs was. And Jack Walker became quite a very well-known figure in the world of football. And he recruited Chris Sutton and Alan Shearer and Tim Sherwood, Tim Flowers, and all of those players that contributed towards Blackburn winning. So to reminisce about 30 years, Blackburn have decided to cut season ticket prices by £30.
Wow, brilliant.
You've got to do that as part of the early bird scheme, so it is linked to a date. Fair play to them for doing so. I don't think they'll make a lot of money on the back of it. I don't think you'll get people saying, well, I will now buy a season ticket. So it does appear to be a gesture towards the fan base. And the Venke family have gone from being despised initially by Blackburn fans to tolerated. And now I think many Blackburn fans appreciate the financial investment that the Venkes are putting in on an annual basis. And this appears to be, again, another nice gesture.
We've talked about this before, Kieran. It may not introduce new season ticket holders. It may introduce one or two. The club probably won't make any money out of it. In fact, they will probably lose £30 a fan out of it, let's be fair. But just in terms of the well-being of Blackburn Rovers fans, they will just feel a little bit better about being a Blackburn Rovers fan this week.
Absolutely.
And that's important.
Tons of tough.
Yeah, and when they're in the pub talking to their mates, missing football, praying for the Euros to start, they'll be going, it's brilliant, isn't it? We've not, I know there's Wolverhampton fans quite rightly throwing their hands up with horror at what's being done to them. And here's a club who's going, it's not, and like you say, it's not a huge amount of money in the great scheme of things. It's a substantial amount of money on a weekly basis for a lot of people. But in terms of the club's image, brilliant. And it takes something simple like that to create a massive upswing in the mood of Blackburn fans. So well done, the Venkies, or whoever decided to do that. And thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that'd be very kind of you. And it'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, the next of which is on the 6th of June, our end of season quiz on the 6th of June. If you're pining for me, this dreadful 10-day period between the football season ending, Kieran, we've got the Champions League, I suppose, but this 12 days without football is the first 2 days fine. Now I just don't know what I'm doing with myself, Kieran. I'm getting on buses and hoping to overhear football conversations just to join in. You can do all that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, you can email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. And we have our YouTube channel. We're always there for you. And if you'd like to buy our book or one of our other books or get yourself a Price of Football t-shirt, you can find details on that same website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back tomorrow with a special interview, which is really interesting. And then we'll be back again on Tuesday with our questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Thanks for everybody, as always, for getting in contact and also highlighting issues for us, which we will do our best to follow up as best we can. There's a variety of ways you can support the show on Patreon. Thank you so much to all the Patreons for the support they give. That's an option for you if you want an advert-free version of the show. But there's another way that you can assist the show, and that's to give us a review. Me and Kevin, we don't understand how it works. It's something to do with algorithms and bots and so on. But producer Guy, he knows what he's doing. By all accounts, it doesn't matter what you say. So in a week in which the option to have national service returning, you could say you would rather have the show presented by Captain Mannering and Private Godfrey, and then you'll know what having a volunteer force is all about and how the country will be so much better.
That's always the problem with Dad's Army, isn't it? Is you just know the first sign. They wouldn't have lasted long, would they? God luck to them. And then Hodges, the grocer, he would have been a quisling. He would have straight. Poor old Private Godfrey, Arnold Ridley, the actor who wrote The Ghost Train. It's probably the most performed sixth form play ever. And wrote The Ghost Train, sold it to someone, and for about 10 quid. Rather than retaining the rights. I know, God bless him. See, you learn a lot of stuff that you can't use in life on this pod, don't you? Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.